everybody. Yes.
Our life. We can hear it, we can feel it, we can chant with it. And this is what we're here to protect. It needs our voice, it needs our engagement. The theme of Stockholm +50 Conference is a healthy planet for the prosperity of all. And to reach that, we need to protect the ecosystems of the world. We don't do that very well today, do we, huh? Why? Mass damage and destruction of nature is not illegal. Welcome to this session, where we will focus on making ecocide an international crime and how this can help reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Pella Thiel, who will be moderating this session with me. And Pella is the co-founder of End Ecocide Sweden.
Yes.
So
Hi.
Pella, what has happened since 1972 for real when it comes to ecocide?
Well, the ecocide has for sure been ongoing the last 50 years. And at that Stockholm Conference in 72, when Olof Palme became one of the very first people to use the concept of ecocide, it was a big discussion in civil society and also in the international policy arena during the 70s. But then it kind of got lost. And it didn't resurface until in 2010, when British barrister Polly Higgins developed this concept, basically. And recently, with the emerging ecological crisis, it last year became the most discussed issue in international law. So this is what we are holding space for today, and we will learn about why it's so salient now, And basically, it's the legal basis for any sustainability agenda.
And we'll be listening to lots of exciting speakers here today.
We will indeed, and it's my great pleasure to introduce you to the first of those. It's a person who was instrumental at the Stockholm Conference in '72 as a member of parliament, Birgitta Dahl, who was also, during her active life, crucial to develop environmental policy, both nationally and internationally. And she later became the Minister of Energy and Environment in Sweden, and I had the pleasure to visit her in her home 2 days ago. And what do you think was the importance of the Stockholm Conference for international policy development?
It was to understand that environmental issues were a matter for the whole world and its future, and that we all had to work together to develop new methods of development in our countries in order to contribute to the environmental issues.
And what happened after this conference? What did it lead to?
Well, I would say both very much, but not enough. Much more needs to be done. We must change all our matters of survival into a more environmental issue, and that is the great task that we have to set up as our goal today. The item I am most proud of in my political life is the decision not to allow any type of violent punishment of children. At first time, there was a strong resistance. We had a long tradition of that kind. But with this new law, we changed the way that people live their life. And now nobody would think of using violence against a child. Well, I do believe that an international law forbidding ecocide would be very useful in our work for a healthy nature and life. In my view, we should never give up hope for the future. You should never jump into the swamp of disappointment. Instead, you should work for a better future for our children and grandchildren.
Well, thank you very much, Birgitta Dahl, and thank you, Pella, for conducting this interview so beautifully. It's now my pleasure to introduce the former president of Finland, Tarja Halonen. Please give her a warm hand. Wonderful to have you here. You have the floor, and you have a table, and the stage is yours.
I try.
It's a little bit of an obstacle course here today with the instruments, but it's worth it. It will be a wonderful concert later, so.
Okay.
You have the floor.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. I was a little bit while already a friend of that I have to pray. I don't do that. So, dear friends, we have not the lack of the environmental crisis, as you have noticed. We have the climate issue, we have the pollution, we have the biodiversity loss, you might add some others. And then, at the same time, we are combating several other crises that demand global attention. Pandemics, devastating wars, many others. So, I think you agree. We could have an easier time to combat environmental crisis but this is the time we have. Many say that we are even witnessing a global emergency and an existential threat. Several planetary boundaries have already been overstepped. However, I want to give a hopeful message why we have the goals, we have agreed with that, and we have the means, and we have the people. Then, with the firm action, we can still ensure survival. And the answer is us. It was here, I became almost nostalgic when I saw my old friend here. So it was here in Stockholm in 1972 when governments established the United Nations Environmental Programme. It was also here where Olof Palme, Prime Minister of Sweden, used the word ecocide for the first time to describe environmentally destructive acts. I think that they found it from the word genocide, which means the total end for the people. But now we first time noticed also that we were part of the nature. Since then, environmental protection globally has made progress. But yes, we also faced headwind. The Rio Conference in 1992 highlighted urgent environmental concerns, but concluding agreements mainly on climate and biodiversity should have been a bit more effective. I had the honor of chairing the United Nations Millennium Assembly in the year 2000, when the international community adopted the Millennium Development Goals. And this was the first ever agreement on global social justice. It was also successful in some parts, but not in all. But social dimension is still a very important part of the SDGs. Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in 2015. And for the first time, they linked social, environmental, and economic development under one framework. The agenda confirmed that everything is interlinked, and we cannot solve global problems in silos. So now we are in a halfway. Unfortunately, we are seriously lagging behind the commitments. The Paris Agreement on climate was adopted the same year, and 2015, and it was shining a light, I would say. However, some countries have not even taken that seriously. Dear friends, the motto of our conference today is a healthy planet and prosperity for all. And it's a fantastic aim. And I think we can now be stronger, more focused than ever. We must ensure the survival of the maximum diversity of all species in the framework of planetary well-being. And this is not easy, as we humans have left almost no space for our fellow non-human species, whose survival is necessary for themselves, but also for our survival. Because, as I already mentioned, we are an integral part of the nature. Our health depends on reasonably diverse and stable ecosystems that buffer against the warming climate and too drastic ecosystem change. Nature gives us numerous foods and medicines and everything good things. In nature, all species feel their own needs and are essential for preventing cumulative tipping points. We are some who have been young a long time ago. And that's normal. I mean, that's life. But I especially encourage those who are still young ones. Thanks for your smile. Young people have been in the forefront of climate activism and called for making ecocide a crime in international law. They have also called for immediate stop to all subsidies to fossil fuels, to set the ban on plastic pollution, to introduce circular economy, and to protect the rights of indigenous peoples. So I'm hopeful for you. The future doesn't look so bad. Dear friends, what about then this ecocide law? How can we advance it? I'm a former lawyer, so you can excuse me if I'm too much fond of juridics. The proposal to make ecocide the fifth crime in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, as per the definition proposed by an independent international panel of experts in 2021, I think it's a good one. In recent years, our rules-based international order has been questioned every now and then. In Europe, for instance, Russia's war in Ukraine demonstrates that the catastrophic impacts caused by the unbelievable disrespect of commonly agreed international principles. Yet, we have also seen that the relationship of trust rooted on commonly agreed principles is a very strong one. Rules-based international order has brought immense prosperity and peace that was not experienced before its creation. So I think that the respect of the rights of the nature is a very logical enlargement of this principle. Too many international environmental agreements and even nationally binding laws have not been able to prevent massive destruction of nature. None of those agreements and laws have had a sufficient scope to cover all the ecological spheres of our planet, meaning first, all living things, 2, rivers, lakes, and oceans, 3, ice cover of oceans and mountains, 4, the stone ground under our feet, and 5th, atmosphere, including outer space. The new international law on ecocide seems to be a solid proposal to bring serious destructive action. It has to be serious destructive action under control in all these 5 spheres. Dear friends, to conclude, I want also to raise my voice to ask for recognition and respect of the rights of the indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have historically been, and luckily often still are, with us, but they have been deprived of their identity and their traditional cultures. Yet some of the richest and most versatile ecosystems on the Earth are in areas legally protected for or otherwise inhabited and managed by the indigenous peoples. So I do believe that we should listen to them. So I think that they and their faith leaders and visionaries, men and women, hold the key to the humanity ties with nature. So we have a lot to have for the conversation. Okay, friends, so now we have to start working together in sunshine and in the rain outside, and we have to include everyone. And I do believe together we are powerful, and what's coming to the timing. Exactly now it's the right time to act. So let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your devoted service to the future generations. Thank you. Thank you.
I saw them.
I noticed. I saw that you saw them.
Even
Wonderful.
under their cap. Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay.
It's now my pleasure to introduce a person that is very instrumental in this quest. Her name is Jojo Mehta, and she's Executive Director of Stop Ecocide International. Please give her a warm hand. You have the floor, Jojo.
Thank you. Hello.
Pella introduced a key name in this movement, the British lawyer, the late Polly Higgins, who brought the concept of ecocide back into the public arena. And Polly was a very dear friend of mine, and we worked together for many years. Polly passed away in 2019. She had brought the conversation about ecocide to many levels of society all around the world. There's a funny thing that sometimes happens when there's a key figurehead to an initiative. Sometimes the rest of us sit back and think, well, Polly's doing that, so I don't need to. What happened when she departed was remarkable, because as her closest associate, I suddenly started to discover that there were many, many people around the world who were interested in criminalizing ecocide. Lawyers, politicians, grassroots activists, academics, and many more. And since that time, in 2019, what was a public campaign that Polly and I founded together in 2017 has since become a global movement, as all of those dots, if you like, have become joined. And from, at the diplomatic level, a kind of a standing start, I suppose, in the last 3 years, this conversation has now become a serious one on the international stage. The small Pacific island of Vanuatu was the first state to raise it at the International Criminal Court in December 2019. And others followed. Emmanuel Macron of France referred to ecocide a number of times, and France actually included ecocide in their climate resilience law last year. It's not as strong a definition as the one that I will describe in a moment, but it's a start. There have been some key milestones over the last year and a half. Last year, our foundation convened a panel of legal experts from around the world, 12 of them, from different backgrounds legally, ideologically, different areas geographically, a truly diverse panel of experts. And that panel was tasked with drafting a consensus definition of ecocide that could practically be used to approach governments and say, could you take this forward at the International Criminal Court? That definition emerged in June of last year, and it was so concise in its core text that it fitted on the back of a business card. And the definition is, ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. It's concise, it's balanced, and it's been incredibly well received in the political world and by the media. In fact, our organization, at the heart of this movement, has been so busy since the emergence of this definition that it feels like our feet have not touched the ground. The definition was officially presented to its ideal destination, if you like, to the Assembly of States Parties of the International Criminal Court in December last year. And that event, presenting that definition, was supported by 3 of the world's most climate vulnerable states, Vanuatu, Samoa, and Bangladesh. There was also a diplomatic intervention from Belgium, which is a front-running country in this conversation, having had a really strong majority vote at the end of last year, demanding that the government legislate for ecocide nationally and internationally. Now we find ourselves in a position where over 20 member states of the International Criminal Court have on public record discussion of ecocide at parliamentary and/or government level. And our job now, and when I say ours, I mean our organization, but I also mean everyone present and everyone watching, is to raise awareness of the possibility of criminalizing ecocide, and at the highest level, providing the foundational piece that is currently missing in protection for the environment, and doing that at the highest level as an international crime. We were gifted a piece of research at the beginning of this year, and it was a big public survey
It was based in the UK, but it was an interesting indicator because what it showed was that over 50% of people hearing about Ecocide law for the first time supported it immediately. And what that tells us is that what we are saying is resonating. It's resonating at all levels of society. But our key task now is to reach out so that more and more people hear about this. The youth movement around the world is calling for it. Even investors and insurers are calling for it. And governments are now starting to take it seriously as the language enters the political sphere and the events at the UN. I hope that everybody watching this will join us in spreading that message and in helping to move this movement and this incredibly important strategic legal initiative forward. Let's make ecocide an international crime. Thank you.
Donziger, fantastic person. He's a lawyer, writer, and environmental advocate known for leading a 27-year legal fight waged by indigenous people groups and farmer communities in Ecuador. And it's a fight that resulted in a historic 9.5 billion judgment ordering Chevron to remediate its so-called Chernobyl disaster in the rainforest. And Mr. Donziger has spent more than 2 years in house arrest in his apartment in Manhattan after he refused to hand over his phone and his computer to Chevron. And he's with us now via the magic of Zoom. Here he is. Wonderful to see you again, Stephen.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be with you and honored to be invited to participate today.
You have the floor to share your keynote, and we are all ears.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. I've spoken with this group from house arrest on 2 other occasions. I want to sort of come at this from the perspective of an on-the-grounds frontline defender, lawyer, and activist. I've worked in the Amazon of Ecuador on behalf of indigenous peoples and farmer communities for 28 years. I live in Manhattan. I've traveled there over 250 times. And I can be a witness, a firsthand witness, to say that had the Ecocide law been in effect at the time the American oil company Texaco, now Chevron, went into the Amazon of Ecuador back in the 1960s, I think the calculation would have been different, and I believe thousands of lives would have been saved. What I mean by that is this. If you go back to the mid-1960s, the consciousness of environmental harm was not near at the level it is today. The campaign to make ecocide the world's 5th atrocity crime hadn't even gotten off the ground. And basically, when Texaco went in there, they made a conscious and deliberate decision to intentionally dump billions of gallons of cancer-causing toxic waste into the waterways and onto the lands, the ancestral lands of indigenous peoples. And over the 25 or so years that the company operated in this huge area of the Amazon, they dumped 16 billion gallons of this waste and left about 1,000 open-air waste pits dug out of the jungle floor. They put pipes in the sides and ran them into water sources that local groups and communities relied on for their drinking water, for their bathing, and for their fishing. Essentially, what Chevron did down in Ecuador was deliberately, out of pure greed, to keep their production costs at a minimum, create a mass industrial poisoning. Now, think about what those executives were thinking at the time they designed this system to pollute. They didn't even contemplate, I would guess, that they would ever suffer any personal consequences. Even human rights law, as evolved as it was at that time after World War II, mostly applied to governments and governmental officials acting in their official capacity. The idea that a private corporation would be subjected to human rights law, much less criminal law, for engaging in acts to deliberately destroy the ecosystem, where it would be clearly foreseeable people would die, as they have. That did not enter the decision-making calculus. And, you know, the Ecocide law and the definition that Jojo just read is so well crafted. It can be, I believe, accepted by so many nations around the world and really, I think, quickly become international law. Would have, in my opinion, completely changed the equation such that the harm that has been visited upon 5 indigenous groups that I represent really might not have happened. And it seems to me that the people who are usually responsible for the decisions in these large oil companies and these large corporations that cause human rights violations to private individuals, they almost never get punished. To criminalize this behavior would, again, completely change the equation. And like, obviously we are in crisis as a planet, and there's a lot of things that need to happen. I would say as a lawyer, as someone who's been on the front lines of this battle for many years, the most important thing, I would say the battle of our generation, or I should say your generation, I'm a little bit older now, but the battle of humanity legally is to make ecocide an international crime. And I would urge everyone, young people, people from different sectors, lawyers groups, to get behind this, just like the original atrocity crimes following World War II were able to generate a very quick international consensus. We cannot continue to allow major polluters like Chevron, Exxon, BP to continue to engage in acts that destroy our planet out of pure motive for profit without paying consequences, particularly when decisions are made to deliberately pollute, as happened in Ecuador. I also want to say that it's very important that those of us who do this work be protected. I have been put in prison and home detention for almost 1,000 days. By the way, I'm free now. That's over. It ended about 5 weeks ago. On a contempt of court charge that was rejected by the regular prosecutor in the United States. And I ended up being prosecuted by a private corporate law firm that had Chevron as a client. Think about that, really think about that hard. In the United States of America, a rule of law country, a human rights lawyer got locked up by a private corporation, an oil company, acting in the name of the United States government. We cannot let that happen, not only in the United States, but in any country in the world. And I will say they also took my passport and have denied me my right to travel, which is one reason why I'm not personally in Stockholm today speaking to you directly. So there are a lot of elements that need to happen in terms of advancing the legal framework so it catches up to be able to hold accountable these companies that for far too long have operated with way too much legal impunity when they go about their extractive practices that are really hurtling us toward destruction and completely decimating indigenous groups who are the real frontline defenders of our planet. So I salute Jojo, Mehta, and all the people around the world leading the charge to make ecocide the next atrocity crime. I'm honored to be invited to speak. I salute everyone in Sweden. What a great country. What leadership you have shown on these critical issues. And also everyone who organized this event at We Don't Have Time. Thank you so much for doing what you do. And thank you for inviting me. I'm honored.
Thank you ever so much, Stephen. As you said, we had hoped to have you here in person. And it didn't turn out this time, but we hope we will see you later. And I personally did my thesis in Ecuadorian Amazon, and I was totally taken aback by, I thought I was going to the pristine rainforest, and instead I went into a fight against oil companies. So I think we all know that we are so grateful to you for your work and to the indigenous communities that you're working with. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
We have heard about Ecocide law from Jojo and how the support for it is growing day by day. Many actors are coming to express support, including several companies and investors. And you may find it surprising that businesses are pushing for strengthening of environmental law. And the word for business in Swedish is actually näringsliv, and that means literally nutrition for life. A bit different than in English, it's more business. But today, law does not support business in this sense as nutrition for life. It's not conducive to regenerative business. Sustainability needs to be superimposed and subsidized. So in the next panel, we're going to ask, how could the earth become our business? And because I think this lack of support from law is really interesting, because for business to become nutrition for life, that says something about what the purpose of business could be. And so how could the earth become our business? I want to welcome a panel of really exciting and experienced people. Introduce Nina Macpherson, former legal officer of Ericsson and board member of several large companies. Welcome.
Thank you.
Andreas Follér, you're the sustainability manager of Scania, and you're also the sustainability manager of the year in Sweden this year.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then we have Ralph Chami, who is on a sabbatical now as Assistant Director of IMF and IMF International Monetary Fund. And you're an expert on fragile, low and middle income states, and also Senior Finance Advisor at the Finance for Biodiversity Initiative.
Yes.
Wow. Most welcome. And I want to ask you first, Nina, because you're not just very experienced as a board member in businesses, but you're also working to elevate the voice of business for Ecocide Law as a chairperson of Ecocide Law Alliance.
That's right. It's a newly founded foundation, and our focus is to gain the support of mainly, well, first the Swedish business society, but hopefully also business society worldwide. It's an initiative taken by actually your organization and Ecocide in Sweden. But we have made that into a foundation now in order to focus on business society and to show politicians that the whole civil society is behind this, not only parts of it, but a whole.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing.
And actually, how old is this foundation?
Oh, well, a couple of months. Or 1 month, perhaps.
Yeah, amazing. It's great to be able to present it like this. So, Andreas, you are working for a company that produces trucks.
Yes.
How is sustainability management done in that company? What do you do?
Well, wow, that's a big question. Of course, I think our starting point is that it needs to be science-based, it needs to be impact-based, it needs to be risk-based. So those are the 3 cornerstones that we're aiming at when we are approaching this really complex area. For us, our impact on the Earth and on climate is mainly downstream with our suppliers. We can make choices, we can make decisions that affects the use of resources and materials in our supply chain, and downstream when our products are being used. Today, and historically, mostly with fossil fuels, unfortunately. So we have a big burden to carry. That's why we have also now started to work systematically with science-based carbon reduction targets. So we were the first company in our industry to set science-based carbon reduction target that ensures that our product development, our strategies are aligned with the Paris Agreement. So we know that we are carrying in our share. So yeah, I could talk for hours,
yeah, of course.
but I think that's a flavor.
Wow, thank you. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So Ralph, you have described yourself as the bad guy, coming from the dark side, and I'm just so intrigued, like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm a financial economist.
Okay.
And when you talk about conservation, typically that's a conversation among activists, scientists, policymakers, NGOs, CSOs, if you like. And we, from the financial side, are kept out of that conversation. But if you believe that climate calamity is upon us, you need everybody inside the tent, including us from the financial sector. And there is a way to bring us all in, and we can all work together to solve this problem.
And actually, I think maybe I really love that description, because I think, you know, integrating the dark side, maybe that's an important part of the transition we're in, actually.
Indeed. I mean, you know, there's an old saying that says, once you see the light, you don't want to walk in darkness, because darkness can overtake you. And if you walk in the dark, you're likely to fall. So we have a period of time, and time is upon us, to do, rather than point fingers at each other, to actually get on with each other and see how we can fix the problem.
Right. Nina, as a former chief legal officer, you're very aware about corporate risk. So I'm curious about, in your view, how does Ecocide law, or how would it impact corporate risk?
Well, I think for most companies that are working on their sustainability, on their maybe circularity, having an Ecocide law in the background creates a level playing field. The same thing goes for everyone. And that, of course, if it lowers the risk or whatever, it doesn't matter so much. What it actually is that it's creating a level playing field. And most companies like to know the rules and that they are similar for everyone. At the moment, we have countries that are very progressive, that have stringent laws on how to protect the environment, while other countries may not have the same strength in their legal system or not the political will to make sure that their companies are working in a good way. So I think, all in all, I think this is a very good tool to make business think about the risk and take the proper decisions. So it's mainly preventative law, in my view. Not so much in dragging people in front of court, but to make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place.
Right.
So I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but that's my take on it.
I think what I hear is that it shifts risk, that it becomes more risky to break the law. Yeah. To break the law, to break the rules and make mass damage and destruction.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in that sense, Andreas, how do you perceive, how would that support your job as a sustainability manager? Do you see it would impact your job in any way?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my dear colleagues in the risk department, my sense is that they don't like insecurities or ambiguities. They like when it's clear cut. So that makes them able to fill in their Excel sheets. So that I think would be a big plus actually for them. And working with sustainability, it's my role to support all functions of the company, as also the risk department. So it would definitely, if they're happy, I'm happy, basically. But I think all companies that are seriously trying to handle their impacts thrives in rule-based systems where there are universal guardrails that are the same for everyone. And I heard someone on stage saying that this is a missing piece, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, the more I learn about this, the more obvious is it that this is a flagrant missing part of the system. I mean, if we're going to race to the top, we can't have companies or private persons undercutting it, the system. So for me, it makes a lot of sense with this thinking around criminalize ecocide from a sustainability corporate perspective.
So listening to you two is like you would wonder if this was on the agenda 50 years ago. Where is the blockages? Why don't we have this already?
Why don't we have it?
No, I mean we, like the big we, the huge we. And why isn't it in place?
To be quite honest with you, I think, please fill in, but what I think is a very useful tool here to spread this and to make people understand that how important this is and how good this is the definition by the panel that came last year. It's that Jojo read to us all.
Right.
And it's clear, it makes it on a similar level as the other crimes. You will not want to dilute the other crimes in the Rome Statute. These are really serious crimes. And now we have a definition that makes this as serious. And I think that resonates really well with everyone. Every sustainable company, every responsible company would want to take this on. Before, we didn't have a definition. And it's much more loose in the edge. You don't know what it is. And that companies do not like, as we said. Rule-based is good. If we understand what it is, then it's also possible to work with. So the definition was absolutely key. That's my take. I don't know about...
Sounds about right.
So, Ralf, you are in the world of finance.
Yes.
It's so exciting to me because money is like energy, isn't it? Like if you have money, you can do things. So I'm curious about how would ecocide as an international crime impact finance flows?
In a very good way. See, laws are about minimums. Laws is about don't. I prefer to think about what we can do. Yeah, people react to incentives. And so the law, I think of it as a minimum requirement, don't do this. But businesses like to know what else can we do. So when we look in the context of what we're discussing, which is the climate calamity, in fact, we are facing two potential calamities. The focus is really on climate, but there's also what Sir David Attenborough has been talking about, which is the loss of biodiversity and the death of nature itself. Those two are risks that are taking place at the same time. And any one of them were to materialize, it's the end of humanity as we know it. So the question is, we can't tackle one without tackling the other. We cannot tackle one and then the other. We need to tackle both at the same time. And both are linked through human activity. We are the ones, it's a self-inflicted wound, if you like. Now the question is, what can we do about it, and how can finance help? Finance has the resources and has the ability to move very quickly. But when the conversation about conservation was just among a select few, the ones that believe in the intrinsic value of nature itself, the finance world and the private sector world was kept out of this conversation. So they ended up financing extractive activities, if you like, because they didn't know better. They were in the dark, if you like. Science arrives and says, guess what? A living and thriving nature is far more valuable to us than an extracted one. Beyond the intrinsic value of nature, for example, a whale, a living whale, can capture so much carbon equivalent to 30,000 trees, one whale. Now, what is the value of a living whale, of the services of a living whale? Currently, in our current economic system, 0. But kill that whale, chop it to pieces, sell it for meat in countries where they still eat whale meat, it fetches $30,000. So there's an opportunity there to value what the value of a living whale, since it captures carbon, and carbon right now is the name of the game in terms of fighting climate calamities. Right. It's just as an example. So what I did with my colleagues, we valued the services, the carbon sequestration service of a whale. Just one service. And one whale produces value equivalent to $3 million. But that's a living and thriving whale. Then the scientists in Africa realized that elephants in the Congo basin help to increase carbon sequestration in the forests of Africa. Yeah. And we can value that service of a living and thriving elephant, right, and that's $2 million, versus a dead elephant fetches for its tusk less than $30,000. So that, for the financial side, starts to present an opportunity around services of a living and thriving nature. Right. But for that to happen, we need the law.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have the finance, we can do the valuation, but for the markets to take this seriously, we cannot abdicate our role for public policy.
It's about merging the intrinsic and extrinsic values and merging economy and law to protect nature. Yeah.
Indeed, and we can do so.
Yeah, we can do that, isn't it? So. I just need to ask Nina a very short question, because the Minister for the Environment in Sweden recently has come out and said that she's reluctant to open up the Rome Statute where ecocide law would sit. And as a lawyer, I know you're a corporate lawyer, not an international lawyer, but do you agree with that risk?
No. That's a short answer.
Yeah. And why is that?
No, so I think with an international convention like that, you always have risk that countries are leaving. But we managed to add the crime of aggression. Mm-hmm. That was possible.
Yeah, so it's not about opening it.
It's not opening up all of it. It's actually making a proposal for a new crime. Yeah. That's not opening. And if someone doesn't like it, they will leave. Someone might dislike the crime of aggression and leave. Mm-hmm. But we manage that.
And someone may come.
That's true.
Yeah. A big hand for this amazing panel. Thank you so much. I think we should have a whole conference on this issue. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Nosotros somos los defensores de la línea de frente, pero también es responsabilidad de todos ustedes involucrarse en esta lucha. No porque están en ciudades grandes, en países industrializados, están salvos de este problema, están libres de responsabilidad. Ustedes tienen igual de responsabilidad que nosotros. No piensen que los pueblos indígenas tenemos una lucha aislada, solo por los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. Es una lucha por la vida del planeta, por sus hijos, por su familia y por ustedes. Así que involúcrenos, solidaricen, apóyennos y luchemos todos para defender esta madre tierra.
We need to turn the tide. We need a new law, an international criminal law. We need a law of ecocide.
You really care about this world, whether you can feel it or not. We've been taught to be numbed off from it, but it's not a truth. Deep down, underneath all the conditioning that we have had pushed into us so that we are severed from everything that matters is the deepest love you will ever feel.
Back in 1972 at the Stockholm Conference.
We shall now hear an address by the Prime Minister of Sweden, His Excellency Mr. Olof Palme. I invite him to come to the rostrum. Mr. President, the realization of the importance of the human environment has had a great impact on international opinion. I have seen no convincing evidence that the problems of the human environment and the interconnected problems of food production, overpopulation, resource management and economic growth and distribution could not be solved. If we manage our own national environment in a sensible way, we are not only contributing to the well-being of our own people, we are giving proof of international solidarity.
Always here.
Ecocide.
Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with the knowledge that there's a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. So ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with the knowledge that there's a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. committee with the knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts.
All countries must accept the responsibility to ensure that their activities do not cause damage to the environment of others.
All countries must accept. Finland. All countries must accept. Argentina.
Of the human environment, there is no individual future, neither for human beings nor for nations.
There is no individual future. No individual future. France. There is no individual future. No individual. Denmark. There is no individual future, Scotland. There is no individual future, Portugal, Vanuatu, Scotland, Finland, United Kingdom, Argentina. There is no individual future. A healthy planet for the prosperity of all.
Our responsibility, our opportunity.
But what if we don't act?
No, mutta kyllähän täytyy jotain ruveta tekemään siis, että miten ihmeeni toivoo.
The air we breathe is not the property of any one nation. We share it. The big oceans are not divided by national frontiers. They are our common property. The air we breathe is not Our future is common. We must share it together. We must shape it together.
Have witnessed a premiere from Global Music for Ecocide Law from the Sibelius Academy in Helsinki. It's a very special time to be alive. We know that what we do now has an impact on the future of humanity and on life on Earth as a whole. My kids are here today, and I know that they will look back in 50 years' time, as we do today. They will look back on 2022, and what will be our legacy? In the next panel, we will meet with people who take their legacy very seriously in their work for a healthy planet, for the prosperity of all.
And it's my pleasure to introduce as the first guest, Andrés Ingi Jónsson. He's a member of the Icelandic Parliament, and he is recently, Andrés put forward a parliamentary resolution urging the Icelandic government to propose adding ecocide to the ICC's mandate, receiving broad political support. So please give him a warm hand.
And we will also
welcome Andrés. Please take a seat in the sofa.
And we will also meet with Richard Brisius, chairman of the Ocean Race, which is focusing on delivering the best sailing race in the world while driving change towards a healthier, sustainable planet. Give a hand for Richard.
Please, Richard, take a seat at the sofa. And with us today, we also have another fantastic guest, Hanna Solman. She's just coordinator of global advocacy and youth participation from the Church of Sweden youth section. And Hanna, you arrived just from a very interesting meeting. We'll talk more about that just now. So please join us here on stage. It's going to be a little bit tight, but you can squeeze it into the sofa, I hope. There you go. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. So, Andrés, you're a parliamentarian. What is your view on how ecocide law can really make and support decision makers like you to make wise decisions for future generations?
Well, it's not only for us to make wise decisions, but also to be a tool to help us fight problems that are maybe bigger than national parliaments as well. I mean, the problems we're faced with today is that even if we've been doing climate change COPs for 26 years now, there's no explicit mention of phasing out and stopping extraction of fossil fuel, even though that's the underlying fundamental problem. And we're always, in every country, fighting different aspects of multinational corporations that are always these faceless behemoths that we as individual national legislators are a bit helpless against. So if we have something global, something bigger than the national sphere to help us, I think that could make a big difference in making bolder moves.
Thank you, Andrés.
So, Richard, I want to ask you, you could view the oceans as the greatest of the global commons, and they are not very well protected in law as they are beyond national legislation. So you have taken upon yourselves as working for the health of the oceans. Could you tell us a bit about why and how?
Well, I'd like to thank for this extraordinary performance that almost took my breath away, both visually and sound-wise, because I love the backdrop with the whole ocean setting the scene, and that's our field of play, the ocean. So we race around the world every 4 years, and we've done that for 50 years, since 1973. And it's a world-class sport event, so it's only for the best sailors in the world. But it's very much about the team making it around the world together. And what we've seen doing this race is the ocean changing. And we've seen how the ocean is both polluted, we see how it's raped, how it's stripped mined in certain ways, and it's just getting worse and worse. And as you say, the ocean has become more and more lawless. And while we all are used to rules coming from sport, and we think fair play is based on fair rules and a fair control system, and that's why I'm obviously here today, because we really support the notion of creating rules and laws and control system for the worst possible crime against nature. And the ocean for us as sailors is something we have come to respect, and we are friends to the ocean, and we are you get this relationship to the ocean. For us, it's unthinkable to do something bad to the ocean. It's like doing something bad for ourselves. But I think most people, or too many people anyway, think that ocean is for us to take from. It's there for us. It's our. Someone says it's our ocean. It's not our ocean. We all came from the ocean.
Right.
The ocean is the biggest life support system. So yeah, long answer. Longer than you wanted.
No, not really. I just
but
I'm
passionate about this.
The marriage between sport and law, like being the need for rules, clear rules for everyone. Thank you.
Hanna, let's see if we can get eye contact here. It's a bit crowded, the sofa. You came just from a pre-meeting. Could you tell us about the meeting you just came from?
Of course. I attended the Stockholm +50 Youth Assembly, so the pre-assembly for Stockholm +50. And we were, I think in total, we were more than 100 youth gathered today at Stockholm University, and tomorrow we'll be at Stockholmsmässan. And there were both youth joining through Zoom, because not all could unfortunately attend the meeting, but there were also a lot of people gathered at Stockholm University where we prepare our global youth position paper for Stockholm +50, and we also got to listen to different lectures and also meet with the Swedish environmental minister Annika Strandhäll and ask her and give her
put some pressure, I guess. Yes, that's good. So what is the message you have to the world leaders from this youth task force?
Well, that this is our future being at stake, and also it's very clear that the crime of ecocide is something highly prioritized by the youth movement. In every youth consultation I've been part of for the last year, in every position paper, every meeting that we've had with different politicians, this is something that we over and over again raise. And we haven't really gotten a response so far. But today I actually asked the minister straight, why aren't you speaking up more about this? And as Pella mentioned before, she mentioned that, we don't really want to open the Rome statue, and but now we see that we have more support than we've had before for this issue, which means that that's what the government think is necessary. So I think being here, talking about this, is really what we should do. We should show them that this is something that we prioritize and find important.
The pressure is on. Excellent. So Hanna, you represent the Swedish Church. I mean, you're in the youth section of the Swedish Church, and faith associations all over the world have joined forces to put pressure on decision makers to make ecocide an international law. So what unites the faith institutions in this?
Well, myself being a Christian, of course, it's easy to look at Genesis, to look at the Bible, which tells me that I should nurture and protect what God created for me, that the earth is something holy. And I know that this is something that I share with I think every faith tradition that I've ever encountered have had this perspective of seeing the earth, seeing the creation as something that we should protect, that we belong to, that we're part of. And therefore I'm so happy that the Church of Sweden Youth, which I'm part of, got to join this Faith for Ecocide Law initiative, which I got to know about through Pella. So I'm really, really happy about that.
And we know what happened on day 2, the ocean. Day 5, humans.
Of course.
Right?
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Pella, when you hear Hanna here and coming from this meeting, how does this resonate with you? I mean, you've been an advocate for Ecocide for such a long time. How important is, and we're doing this for the future generations, but they're also doing it for themselves. I mean, how important is this dynamic?
I mean, it's totally amazing. To me, it's such a relief to hear this, that finally, this self-evident thing that we should have done 50 years ago finally is surfacing. And it's so much through youth actually raising the issue towards Stockholm +50. You can't overestimate the voice, I mean, the importance of your voice today. So thank you so much. I mean, we should all be very grateful, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, because I know that the Church of Sweden also have a very impressive work around rights of nature. And that is something that you're also engaging in from your part, from the ocean rights, which is such a pioneering thing. So how did you come across that? And what is it that you're doing with the rights of the oceans?
Yeah, well, I don't know how it came about exactly, but when it came about, it felt very natural for us to realize that the ocean nature and the ocean has its own rights. And we have been inspired by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was settled to create a Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights. So that's our vision, that by 2030 we should have a Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights, and that's what we are working towards together with a growing number of organizations and countries. And we feel like a very small player in this big global network of organizations like everyone together here today, but we very quickly got support from the big players that we have an important role to play in this, even though we are small too, because we come from the ocean and we believe in this. So we are driving towards the Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights. And that sort of sums it up in a way. But then we know, and you know, many of you here and looking at this today, that it's so hard to get this across in proper communication. So it's a communication challenge, and that's what a lot of the environmental issues and problems we are facing are. So, but this is extra difficult to communicate about, I find it. So, but today obviously it's very easy because we are all thinking alike, I think. So, but I think that's where we have to sharpen up.
Yeah. And as you said, so you believe that if we know that the ocean has rights, there has to be a legal sanction.
Of course, also. Yeah, because that's how, as humans, that's our way of operating. We need rules and sanctions and control, and that's why the system that we're striving for here is definitely what we believe in.
Right.
Excellent. So I'd like to turn to Andrés. You're basically on the receiving line of all this. Well, you're a good guy, so not like that. But in terms of communications, what do you think is? Can you give any good advice for Richard and for Hanna and all these movements? How to really, what buttons to push to make this really happen? Because we're sort of on a breakthrough here, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no magic formula, I think, but because I've taken Ecocide out for a test drive as a policymaker, I've been pleasantly surprised by how easy it's been to communicate. I mean, it's changing international law, so you'd think that would be too abstract for most people to comprehend from the first sentence. And we're used to this problem with climate change, for instance, where people just fall asleep as soon as you start talking about all these numbers and percentages. But with Ecocide, there's something that resonates with almost everyone we've spoken with. So, I mean, everyone has a story of some piece of nature they've loved that's been damaged in the interest of economic progress. So they ask us, okay, this big dam that the government allowed to sink some delicate highland ecosystems just to feed into an aluminium smelter, would that fall under ecocide? That's like half of the responses I get. Because people understand the basic concept. So all I have to do is say, well, it's like that, but bigger. So it's transnational. It's not this aluminium smelter. It's not carving through pristine lava for a road. It's not the military poisoning a water well, and rather than repairing it, just drilling a new one, and everyone's fine with that. People's experience of this lack of accountability and damage even not being seen as criminal or negative in any way, because it's just part of what we have to sacrifice for the economy. There's a deep sense in the public that this needs to be addressed on the local level. So it's really easy to translate that into something that needs to be done internationally. So after years of struggling with how do we communicate complex environmental and climate issues, suddenly it's easy with this thing. Everyone just gets it.
That's wonderful. Pella, what is your response to this?
I'm wondering about your resolution. What do you think will happen in the Parliament of Iceland?
Well, I mean, I'm positive by nature, but we also have numbers that are looking good. So we have 12 members of the Icelandic Parliament supporting it already. And I mean, okay, if you need to know something about Iceland, we're very small. So 12 members might not sound impressive, but that's out of 63. So that's a big portion of Parliament that already supports it, from 4 parties that span the whole spectrum, but don't count as a majority of the Parliament yet. We haven't taken it to the first discussion. So we don't really know what sort of discussion we'd be getting, but I don't think we should have big problems. The people that I've spoken to within Parliament seem optimistic. The NGOs, the civil society, has been calling for something like this for years. So we have grassroots support. And the youth that's been leading the fight against climate for the past years in Iceland. We have an incredibly strong youth organization in Iceland. They're all for this, and I'm sure your opinion paper for the big conference will highlight this very strongly. So with that backing, I mean, how can we fail?
Exactly. but honestly, it sounds like there's a walk in the park. There's no resistance. Don't you meet with resistance? I mean, what arguments against do you hear?
I mean, resistance always comes a bit later when the special interests realize that this might become a reality. Then someone might wake up and start pulling the brakes. I mean, we've seen that. But we'll deal with that when it happens.
Right, yeah, you seem very confident.
So Pella, for the international movement, what impact will this Icelandic, if or when you get a green light, what impact will this have on the global ecocide movement if Iceland gives it a green light?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question, because it's exciting that we're talking so much about the voice of youth, how important that is, because youth actually has a very weak voice in society usually, but in this case, very strong because of the ethos that you carry. But actually, as Jojo said in the beginning, it's crucial. Like, everybody who speaks up right now on this issue is really important. So every parliamentarian, every country, every sailing race, every company, everybody. It's really, I mean, a person like Andrés, who is so confident with this, that's so encouraging for us who have been, knocking on these doors for years. Like, when this happens, it's like, it really shifts the whole conversation.
And it's just a group effort anyway. I mean, the resolution we put forward, it's a rough copy of the Belgian resolution that went through last year. So basically, wherever we have success, we need to emulate that and use it to push us further in our own situation.
And this, of course, can spread to other countries. That's the intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's already conversations ongoing in more than 20 countries. So it's actually exploded just the last 2 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. I think it's fair it goes to Hanna, because you're going to live longer in the future than most of us here in the panel. And Hanna, when you hear Andrés and when you listen to Richard's quest here for the oceans, what kind of feelings do you get in your body? I mean, what is your sense of essence here, and for your future and the future of your peers?
I think I feel hopeful. I do in general, because I think otherwise I wouldn't persist in this world, that we can make a change, and especially since there's so many different actors, I think that's so fascinating. Also listening to the business people here before, that gives me strength. And especially also being part of this youth movement, which also, you know, you can see that people in Kenya and New Zealand, like everyone's talking about this and want this to happen. And yeah, that gives me hope and strength. And this conversation also gave me that.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Hanna. Thank you so much, Andrés and Richard. And of course, my co-host and co-moderator here, Pella Thiel, who's been driving this race for quite a long time. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to actually, for the first time here on the stage.
As you can imagine, there's the long and the short version. So here you'll get the staccato short version, which is basically the scientific recognition that we are deep in the Anthropocene. We're now, as humanity, the dominating force of change on Earth. We're even at a point where we're forced to consider the risk